Welcome back to the 40% Better podcast. As always, we're talking about leadership and specifically leadership around software engineering. And Rodrigo has generously volunteered to give us some of his time, help us hear his stories, and get some different perspective on what it's like to work with software teams. Welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So I only have one question that I ask every guest. This is kind of the starting point. And it's what's your origin story? Like, how did you get started doing leadership at whatever age? You know, it could have been, putting together soccer teams when you were 7. Like, how did that get started?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that also taps into what do we define by leadership to some degree. But let's go broad, and I will ask the audience to bear with me. I'm going into this ego trip, narcissist journey. So, I apologize in advance. But thinking in retrospect, I think the first time I manifested something that could be interpreted as a leadership skill would be around 5th grade when I wrote down a play. And that play was actually enacted by my class. And then the teachers liked so much that every class on 5th grade was invited to enact that play. And for my class, I was asked to be the director of the play. So that was kind of a leadership role at an early age, if you will. Other things that come to mind would be like organizing a spy game group in the building that I lived in Rio de Janeiro, where we had to be creative in terms of how do we play. Lots of kids in the same building. And at the time, I was playing with older kids, so I should be about like 11 years old, and some 13 and even one 14-year-old kid got interested in this spy thing because it was kind of new. So it was another facet of leadership at an early age. More formally, I would say it will be class representative at high school. In the schools that I've been in Brazil, it was common to pick one student to represent the class and take some like red tape duties. And I did that once or twice. But I would say it's more about initiative in my case. Leadership manifested of taking initiative when others stepped back. Like when I organized the first Python Brazil conference in Brazil, which was 2005, and in 2004 we had an international open source conference, and one guy called Alan Runyon, American guy, he was giving a talk there, and he said, in Brazil, you guys are big enough to have a Python conference already. Why don't somebody organize it? And then I said, hey, this is an opportunity. So I stepped forward and said, I will do it. I will do it next year. And that was a milestone in the Python Brazilian community to kind of get around and more formally evolve. So I think that was another evidence that I can provide to your question.
That is awesome. I love that. Like the having the initiative, like that's a really interesting adjective, I guess, to go like to really see it as taking initiative to make something happen when nobody else steps forward. I really like that. And that's such a I'm always looking for different kinds of insights from people, and the way they self-express around the leadership framework.
I see.
And that initiative idea is a great one, because that's not always a word that we hear people say when they're talking about leadership. There's lots of other words they use, but that one, which which really is kind of key to the whole thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
was kind of, I must confess, I did some homework before joining this interview with you. So I went to 40% Better and heard a couple of episodes
yeah,
to
yeah.
understand what to expect. And there were some people, and by the way, congrats, it's a great show. So
Oh,
it's
thank
really
you,
truly
thank you.
an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you.
Um, and it was interesting to see how some people went on the semantics of what leadership means and the relation between leadership and management, for example. And I
Hmm.
think that connection may explain the initiative thing because it's not that obvious when you are in a chain of command, the initiative becoming as pronounced feature of leadership. If
Right.
you think like military, anybody can be a leader. It depends what is the highest path in the room.
Yeah.
So that one will be the leader immediately, and that's it. And if there's only soldiers, then, and you can see that in movies, then you really see who is emerging as a leader. Is the one who takes the initiative, is the one who
Yeah.
kind of reads the landscape and knows what to do and takes action and leads by example. So reflecting upon the deep meaning of leadership, I came to this initiative thing.
Yeah. I really like that. Yeah. 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 It's such a, um, like I did not grow up. I was I was not organizing other people when I was growing up.
Okay.
I
Two
was
people.
much, yeah, yeah. It was, do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Okay. Maybe because I was an only child.
Okay.
You know, I just grew up doing a lot of things by myself. And, when I, when I got promoted to run my first software team, it was completely unexpected.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah. And, uh, it was because when I asked my then boss about it, his answer, which I realized in retrospect was all about initiative, was this was a startup, and I was uh, like one of the first 5 people there,
Okay.
other than the founder.
Okay.
Um,
That's very early.
and but we were a spinoff from another company,
Okay.
and so part of our stakeholders was people in the other company. I kept going to people in the other company trying to figure out all their pain points, like
Mm-hmm.
basically product management 101. Um, and my boss liked that. And so when he said, okay, you know, like you can't write code fast enough to build all the stuff we need, and I don't expect you to. You need to hire people and run them. His reasoning was that I was going after solving these problems, and he expected that I could get the rest of the team to run well.
Right.
Um, but it's interesting because it was not something I had thought about before,
Cool.
about, you know, part of my career path. So yeah, it's interesting, you know, kind of different angles.
Right. And
But
I
yeah, I
think
like,
you
yeah,
you brought up another aspect, just like saying that it occurs to me the diplomatic aspect as well, because a lot of the leader is like being this ambassador,
hmm,
orchestrator, maestro to kind of make people work together. And it's
right,
a lot about communication. I think that was approached in other episodes as well, the
yeah,
importance of communication and etc. And I
yeah,
think it's a segue to the initiative because, like you said, usually you don't do things all by yourself. It's a group of people. So the leader takes the initiative. The right next problem is okay, how do I gather people around the initiative, around the energy I'm putting in motion right now? And then
right.
communication becomes the next most important skill.
So talk about that next skill. Like,
Okay.
how did you, you know, what are your communication secrets? That's
Right. Yes. So, well, I was raised in a family that were movie addicts. So both my parents, they love stories. They love going to the movies. So I grew, and when I was like very young, my brother is 5 years younger than I am. So in my early childhood, I was very alone, like I was a single child.
Mhm.
And then at that time, it was basically television. So I kind of knew everything that was going on the television at the point in time. And that included movies. There was no censorship. So I was watching totally inappropriate movies for my age. I'm sure. Uh, but I think that helped to kind of build the the passion for communication, like seeing communication patterns, understanding what I was seeing, and then telling what I just saw. So not long after that, I started dictating stories to my mother. So at the time, there were no computers, so that reveals my age, not just the white beard. But my mother had this typing machine where, like, the youngsters hearing your podcast may not even know. Maybe they saw one in a museum, but you put paper in, you turn it, the paper in manually, and then you start typing. It's just tack, 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 tack. And I was dictating like stories to my mother uh, because I needed to put it out. Those ideas in my head, I needed to put them out. So maybe that was another thing that I started emulating and training from an early age that kind of became a skill when I was invited to become a manager or take a more pronounced leadership role. I already had that in my pocket, so it was a little easier.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I also learned how to type on a mechanical typewriter. I,
Okay.
the hair that I have is very gray.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, and I remember it's funny how you did the carriage return thing. It's a
Exactly.
mechanical
CR.
carriage return. Like you get to the end of the line that nothing, it stops.
It's
You've got
line
to,
feeds and carriage
yeah,
return.
yeah. It's such a funny mechanical metaphor, for stuff. That's yeah, and
Yeah,
I
it's funny
started.
because we are in this with this technical audience. When I started manipulating files, and there were these nuisance differences between Windows, Mac, and Unix, because
Mhm.
one had line feeds, the other just had carriage return, and then Windows decided let's put both, but they're totally unnecessary. One is more than enough, and nowadays we only have line feeds, but it all comes back from the typing machines
Right,
because
yeah.
then we needed both.
Right. And things that were like, just thinking about, I remember the first typewriter I used didn't have a built-in, uh, like a delete,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'd use whiteout
Exactly.
and
Whiteout.
then
Yeah.
type over the whiteout. And, the worst thing was I'd be in the middle of a page and all of a sudden, whatever I had to do would completely change the line. And then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore because, I've got to like type the whole line or tear the
Yes.
whole, it's like
It
throw
was
away the
messy.
paper and start all over again, right?
Yes. God
Um,
bless digital editors.
yeah, yeah. And then we got a typewriter, but it had memory.
Oh yeah, I
It
remember
was
that.
like
It was a
one
single
right.
line.
It was like some number of characters. Like I want to say it wasn't even a whole line, the first one.
Okay.
It was like 48 characters, maybe something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And I remember always like, okay, I've got to like, I can't make a mistake that's longer than 48 characters.
Yeah, the constraints that we once lived with and
Yeah,
now vanish, right? It's
right.
interesting.
So funny. Oh my God. Just like, sorry, total segue there about,
Yeah, no, yeah, but
ancient history, thing. Um, yeah. So when you like, I think communication's a huge thing. And I think that storytelling ability, um, growing up like that, clearly there was some kind of, and especially when you get to the point of you're dictating stories to your mom. Mad props to her, by the way, like for being willing to like be your dictation, right? To be the the speech to text
Right.
annotator of
Yes.
the day, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah. Like, what kind of patterns or pragmatic skills do you recognize you built up over time that are transferable?
I see. But when you mean transferable, you mean from one problem to another problem. Is that
So from one problem to another, or from one person, right?
okay?
Like, I always, like, for me,
I see.
yeah, like, I'm super systems oriented in my head, and so I always think about. And by the way, I didn't start doing this until, like, I really didn't start thinking about everything being a transferable skill until maybe, like, I definitely had gray hair. I think I was 40.
Okay.
Um, when I started thinking, like, started realizing as a pattern that I was doing this
Mm-hmm.
and was able to actually start talking about it. But it's like, um, because I want to see consistency of outcomes, I
Mm-hmm.
always think about how do you break it down into a system that someone else, like math,
I see.
right? Like, everybody knows that 7 times 3 is 21.
Got it.
At least the math that I learned. Okay, I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
no,
Sounds about right to me. Yeah.
okay, good. Uh, maybe they teach math differently in Brazil, and you're going to be like, oh
No,
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 of
no.
course,
It's the same
it's,
thing. Same,
yeah,
same thing.
totally. But how do we consistently get the same kinds of outcomes, and especially from a leadership position? You know, one of the things that I recognized was that I wanted anybody that moved into leadership out of one of my teams to be able to get the same kind of results from their people that I was getting from my
I see.
people, right?
I see. I see.
And so, I think of everything as like, okay, what are the skills? What are the practice?
I
Um,
see. I think now I'm entering dangerous territory because
cool.
it's something I never intentionally thought about in the way you're proposing right now. So I never thought about, is this a transferable skill or not? When I was like coaching or mentoring other people, we were simply working on, okay, this is the problem that you have. This is why it's working or not working. And these are behaviors that may help you to get there. But I was not really concerned if I was able to transfer the skill. I was just like showing what path I would cross if I were in that position. So
Hmm.
it's interesting. I never thought about that. Now I risk saying that most skills may be transferable, maybe except drive. I think,
Right.
that willingness to do stuff, that drive, that ambition, that is much harder, if possible at all, to transfer. If you have that, I believe there is no obstacle that cannot be transposed. So,
Right.
for example,
Yeah.
if you look at Instagram, sometimes I go to Instagram and I watch random things. So there are like people in China doing juggling or extremely fine art detail. A guy mixing colors. They look at a color and then they mix real time and they have the exact tone. And they just kind of mix real time because they kind of train their brain to be a human machine of mixing colors, or the fine detail of producing silk and art based on silk. So
Hmm.
extremely fine craftsmanship, or athletics. People, Tom Cruise, I think is a great example. Tom Cruise doing his own stunts, testing his own limits, staying underwater, attached to the outside of a plane, jump through buildings. So he's really testing his limits, but he has this drive. I think
Right.
it's much harder to put that desire in the heart of another person. For example, when I was teaching computer science for in the freshman year, So that is 2002. I finished my master thesis. I was already working for the industry, but I wanted to have the experience of teaching stuff at a college. So I
Mhm.
talked to one of my former professors who was a director at a university in Brazil. And then I said, hey, do you have any class that I can teach? Because I want to have that experience. And then they invited me to teach first algorithmic analysis, which is very math oriented. Lots of people leaving the course because they got at that wall. So it was strategic to have success in that subject so that private university didn't lose revenue. So that was my challenge. I was somewhat successful that he invited me to teach freshmen because people on their very first course, very first year, if they churn, it's the most impact on revenue for the university. So he said,
Mm.
hey, Rodrigo, you were successful on algorithm analysis mid-course. I'm allocating you. That guy showed great business thinking, even in the academic world. I only later I understood why are you moving me from algorithmic analysis to teaching introduction to programming. It feels like I'm stepping down. And then he explained to me, no, 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 I'm putting you in a much more important position because this is critical to get stickiness with our customers, which are the students.
Right,
And
right.
then my goal was it's more important to inspire them for the passion of computing than giving this crew any content, any given content that I can give to them. It will be less an achievement than if I made them fall in love for computer science. So I was a Cupid. My job as a teacher was to become a Cupid and bring them to love computer science. So that's completely changed the way I approached teaching for first year students, for example. But it's super hard, you know. It's a much harder goal than simply training people in a particular set of content skills.
Okay, I love that.
Okay.
First of all, that is an awesome story, and clearly your storytelling ability is amazing.
Thank you.
Like you're really good at that,
Thank you.
especially using a word like Cupid in there. You know, that's like,
It gives a
it's
little color.
it does, and it's such a visceral sensation. You know,
Yeah.
when you say that, that's such a I really like that. Um, the in my head, the word that comes up when you're talking about people falling in love with computer science is all about intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
and and I think a lot and over the years have done a lot to really help people um, people on my teams and people that I've coached to find that piece, right? What is the intrinsic motivation? Because that drive that you're talking about is 100% tied to intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
right? I can't give you intrinsic motivation, and you're right. It's not a transferable skill, right? And so, do you have any secrets, tricks, skills, techniques for helping people figure out their intrinsic motivation? Because if you got freshmen
Right.
to fall in love with computer science,
Right.
there had to
Right.
be something in there.
Yes. Yes. So let me think.
Sure.
that's
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
an.
yeah.
I never thought about having a particular secret sauce for this, but what I believe, why I was successful. First of all, the honesty of myself being in love for the thing that I want others to be in love with. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, a lot of authors say, oh, I write the books for myself. It's great that other people enjoy what I write, but I write them to please me. So
Right.
that honesty, it's like it's a key ingredient. So
Mm-hmm.
it's much harder for anybody to get in resonance with something that you're saying if you don't believe it yourself. That
Right.
is one
Right.
of the reasons why like most like managerial books that I read Some of them I stop right in the middle because I
Yeah.
don't see that connection. They
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
more artificial. And others, I'm completely hooked because I know that person believed what they were saying. And then I say, okay, there's something there. So this is one requirement. The other thing, perhaps more specifically to that particular scenario, teaching freshman people, I had one trick that I, if not created, rediscovered. So the problem that I had was a very large classroom. It was 90 people. So the very first day, I interviewed all the students. So the class was me interviewing the students all together, one by one, saying, why are you here? What brings you to a computer course? And what is your experience with computers? And there were kids that never touched the mouse and others who already program in C++ because their father or older brother were exposed. So it was very heterogeneous audience that I had on my hands. So I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because it's completely different groups of people. You always expect the Gaussian, the normal curve, a few people very skillful, a few people very kind of clueless, and in between on average. But I never expected that range of diversity. So I was thinking, how can I tackle that and yet make them feel successful in their learning? Because that is the second ingredient. You need to feel successful in your learning. If it's
Right.
just frustration, you will give up, you know? Smart people will give up and focus on other things if they're just unsuccessful. You need to have that kind of balance between failure and success to keep going on. But I realized it was not scalable for me as a teacher to help 90 people in that amount of time. So I created what I call at the time Big Brother. Big Brother in homage to having a true Big Brother, not George Orwell's kind of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like,
So, and nowadays it's a problem. I would say Big Brother or Big Sister or your older sibling. In English, we could say big sibling. It's much more adequate. In Portuguese, we don't have that option. There's no word for either brother or sister. We don't have a direct translation for sibling. So there I called Big Brother. But anyway, so the idea of Big Brother was the following. I do an exam, and that exam is just to measure how much they already know the stuff that I'm about to teach. And that will separate the class in two clusters. And the one cluster that is more proficient on the content can adopt somebody from the other cluster. Why do I do that? Usually, smart people will get together with other smart people. So the strongest kids will form groups with other strong kids. It's just kind of common sense. So I want to break those grouping by creating an incentive for very strong people to associate with somebody who has a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenges. So the person who got 0 on my proficient exam, there was a fight to become the big brother for that particular kid because he had maximum potential for growth. And the reward was to get half of the score in between your first official exam and your second official exam. So let's say you got an 8 and then you got a 10. So it's a 2 delta. So you get half of that, 1 point, to throw in any exam. So if you are a big brother and you are already proficient students, you don't need to study much and you get an 8, a 9, or a 10. And it's kind of random, the amount of effort you're going to invest to get to a 10. But if you do something like that, you get extra credits. So you don't need to invest that much energy. They think, right? That's what they think because they don't know, like I knew, that teaching is very hard labor. So, but anyway, that kind of worked beautifully because then I broke those kind of strong groups into more balanced groups. And then there were proper incentives for people to get together. And I shared that story, and I know of other professors in Brazil that adopted that with great success, even though they calibrated the reward a little bit. So they use other formulas for the reward, but the idea was the same. And I believe then I simply delegated. So that's maybe another secret sauce in a way. Sometimes you need to delegate and trust the delegation. And that is a transferable thing from academics to the corporate world.
Yeah. Oh, that's genius. I really like that.
Yeah, it doesn't work for other courses because, for example, in biology, let's say,
Yeah.
not as common for people to get the first year and they already like Charles Darwin. But in computing, it's funny. It happens, lots
Right.
of people
Right.
getting there. I myself, when I got to my first year, I already knew basic. So I was a little bit ahead of the curve at the time.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's, it's interesting because number one, that's a great system. Like that's really, really clever. I really like it.
Cool.
Um, and it has um, so many long-term benefits for the students because they get used to asking for help. They
Yes,
get used to coaching other people, and that becomes normalized.
exactly. It
And
was a win-win-win.
yeah, yeah. And software teams, you've always got varying degrees of expertise in different contexts, and being able to have everybody be really comfortable communicating and not have it be an oddity that you're talking
Exactly.
about something and you're trying to make sure that the person understands whatever we're doing the best is really making sure that everybody else is leveled up as much as possible so that even if they don't understand all the exact details, at least they contextualize the conversation and can contribute to it. All right. And
Exactly.
can think about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Years later, I was exposed to like pair programming.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah,
then I
totally.
noticed it's kind of the same
Yes.
mechanism of sorts.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, instead of going to the manager or the staff or principal, you have a colleague that may be a little more experienced than you. And then you can have a more freely exchange with them. And that will boost your professionalism and skills.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also there's other thing I've noticed where, especially in paired programming, where oftentimes, because I tried to randomize the pair programming,
Right.
is you'll have one person who is really good with thinking up a solution, but they don't know how to write the code,
Right.
or they're not as proficient at writing the code.
Yes.
And the other person can't come up with a solution, but as soon as you do, they're like, oh, blah, blah, and they're like on the keyboard and they're hammering out the code and they get done, like in a magic amount of time, because you've got this interesting multiplication effect. And
Yes.
starting off with that kind of communication, because a lot of people get into computer science are not really good at communicating.
That's
That's part of
true.
the reason they get into it.
Yes.
Starting them off and really getting them past that hurdle of communication has so many knock-on effects, beneficial later on.
Absolutely.
There's a huge ripple effect on that. That's really, I hope that your school has done that ever since you were there. Like that should have been a standard.
It was not incorporated because
Oh, that's too
not
bad.
many teachers liked that at the time for several reasons.
Really?
Yes. One reason is that it's more work for the teacher to some degree because you really need to coordinate the pair and you need to give some kind of an additional assistance. What I've noticed let's say this. There are two types of universities in Brazil. One of them is private. And the private universities, the teacher is just rewarded by his time in the classroom. So you're basically a machine of giving classes. I don't know if that changed, but at the time I was there, that was the reality. And public universities, it was the opposite. Teachers were researchers. They were forced to give classes, but they were rewarded by published papers. So I studied at a public university, in Brazil. The Ivy League in Brazil, it's all public. It's funny. And so the best universities are the public universities, not the private ones, which is funny. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then you attract a lot of very rewarded scholars and researchers. But for them, teaching is a new, for some of them, not all of them, let's be fair. But to most of them, teaching is a nuisance because the incentive is on publication. Their career is as a researcher. And teaching undergraduates and graduate courses is a requirement, but not what they're rewarded for. This is one point. And for the others, the private ones, because they had to go from one class to another class, they had so many classrooms. Creating those fanciness, it's more work. So the trade-off between time invested and money reward didn't balance out. In my case, I was teaching for fun because my revenue came from writing software. So I was part-time in the industry, being well paid for the time I wrote code. And 3 times a week, I give one classroom, 2 hours on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And that was it. So it was manageable, but I was not concerned about the revenue. So I experimented with lots of other things that teachers wouldn't do because it would not be cost effective for them.
Yeah.
So that is a funny thing of our society. We create those traps that prevent innovation in certain domains. It's a shame, but that's how I read the situation after I stopped teaching at college. I still teach. Nowadays I teach an MBA teaching AI and data science for non-technical people. So it's another university now in Rio. I teach remote courses because I'm in North Carolina, but that course is in Brazil, in Rio. It's still fun, but it's a completely different experience.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're talking about thinking about what's the incentive, and the financial thing is the incentive, and your experiment sounds like a significant upgrade in the outcomes for the students, and I'm thinking like, okay, now how do you modify the system to incentivize student outcomes actually being, and it's a student outcome that you probably won't notice until 2 years after they graduate.
Right.
When they're in the workforce and you're like, oh, the people from Rodrigo's class keep getting promoted and they keep getting all the cool projects.
Right.
Like,
right.
This is some researcher from one of the public schools.
If we had that provenance, it would make a great curriculum for me.
Yeah, that would be the research project for somebody from one of those.
Actually, LinkedIn makes that possible to a certain degree. I don't have a control group, so statistically I have that problem. But at least I can show some evidence to support that, showing the people from the classes that I taught and what happened to them. And at least statistically I could say maybe these people is above average. So that's a possibility. But the other teachers that adopted my method, they told me they noticed higher rates of approval on their courses because of that. And I think that is obvious, simply because for the teacher, sometimes the teacher invests their time on the students that are going well, simply because they have that affinity, they have that confirmation bias of, oh, this student is doing good. It's proof that I am a good teacher. So I invest more time in these students and I will make them even better. But they should invest the time in the ones that are not doing so well.
Right. Yeah.
It should be the opposite. But they don't have the same incentives there.
Right.
And that allowed me, at least, to focus on the one that needed more attention and let more lose the ones on average, because the proficient ones will take care of those. So the approach overall, the mechanics of the approach, it speaks for itself. It's a better a balance of energy in the classroom.
Yeah. That's such a smart thing, and it's your ability to be able to delegate and trust. That's leadership. Like in action.
Yeah, and it was not intentional, and that's why they say that necessity is the mother of invention. So I didn't really have time to make anything too sophisticated. So the system was really simple. Somebody adopts somebody and then do anything except during exam time. But anything else that you want to do, it's up to you guys. 100% delegation. Do the best that you can. And let's see what happens at the end,
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking, oh, that's such a smart approach. And if you can figure out how to instill that in a business setting,
that's interesting.
where you've got, because in any context, right, like sales, right, you've got a sales team and everybody's got revenue goals, and the person that's doing the best probably knows some stuff and has some mental models, some skills, some habits that the person that's doing the worst doesn't have.
Yes.
And if the best person can help the worst person get better.
So that's such an interesting provocation. Let me try to respond to that.
Yeah.
Some companies tried things like that. For example, I remember Valve. Valve was responsible for Half-Life game and other successes. And I remember they publishing a manifest where they said, we have a different managerial structure. We simply let people loose, self-organize, propose projects, and then we keep financing the projects that are successful. And if a project is not successful, then we stop financing, and that people needs to be absorbed to another group. So it's more kind of chaotic kind of thing. It kind of goes towards that direction of more freedom and more delegation and trustworthiness. But most of the companies that I worked, they had a much more strict culture in terms of control.
Right.
Why does that works in the academic space? Because in colleges that I've been through, I never been to a college in the US, but at least in Brazil, either as a student or a teacher, every subject, every discipline is a feudal kingdom, highly independent. The teacher is king or queen. Course coordinators don't really care. They simply say, handle it. And then those teachers have freedom to do whatever they want. In the company, that doesn't fly. So we would have to have the right culture to get, for example, in the companies I've been through, except very tiny ones, if they go through like, I don't know, 400 people and above, the Game of Thrones is kind of established, and some tentacles of control sometimes prevent us to breaking the barriers across squads and resource allocation. People are very protective of their resources. They want to know what they are doing with their time and who they are talking to and who they are collaborating with. Some companies create an internal competitiveness that prevents that from happening. I know stories from, I don't know, maybe Microsoft was famous for having a more competitive landscape. I guess few companies have this extreme collaboration culture,
right,
with high delegation. I think it can work, but it's not common.
Yeah, Yeah, huh. I'm just like I'm thinking back to stuff that I've done with teams that I've had,
Mm-hmm.
and how they so like my first like I got super lucky with my first software team,
Okay.
because my first hire was a super smart. He was a computer science major out of Berkeley,
Okay.
who I think graduated magna cum laude, something like that, like the top of his class.
Right. Right.
And he'd started programming when he was 12.
Right.
And he knew more
Great.
about programming because I was self-taught,
I see.
right? Like he knew like more when he was 18 than I did,
I understand.
period,
I
you
understand.
know? And so when he came in, I was like, oh my God, this guy can code circles around me. And then 3 of his friends joined us,
Okay.
all
Awesome.
from Berkeley. They're all computer
Right.
science majors. So
I
I just
see.
had this squad that I was like, okay, you're the smartest people in the room. My job is just to put the right problems in front of you and kind of, boundary and guardrail this and make it work. And not to I didn't try to manage them very hard at all.
Right. But then you were in the frontier of the squad. So it speaks more one-on-one to what I described as professor in classroom.
Right.
When I mentioned the barriers, it's more across the squad. So now there's these people here. I want them to collaborate with other people in the company that do not report to me.
Right. Right.
That's when the Game of Thrones come into play and
Yeah.
feudal relations starts to get in the way. So you start talking about let's do a work group, let's do a tiger team, and then you have to negotiate a lot to make that
Right.
happen and
Right.
justify a lot. I wish companies were more flexible for us to do that kind of experimentation, you know?
Yeah. 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 Every place where I've done that kind of thing and been really successful with um with the teams, operating at a high accountability, delegation, personal responsibility, self-motivation kind of thing. Um, I think the biggest company I've done that at was maybe 500 people.
Okay.
I haven't, it's like I've either been at companies that are 500 or less,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mostly, 500 or less. I think probably most like under 350
Mm-hmm.
or thousands and thousands,
Got it.
and
Got
the
it.
ones that are thousands and thousands, um, the thing that for me was challenging was that people there tended to want to just work on one thing.
I
Like they'd
see.
been hired to be I'm a coffee mug maker,
I see.
right? And that's it. And I only make this kind of coffee
Right.
mug,
Right. Just
this
like that.
shape, right? And nobody, like, I don't want to hear about making ballpoint pens,
Right. Right.
you know?
Right.
And so um that's where the whole Game of Thrones, like,
Gets
that's
in the way.
just it, right?
Yeah.
And and in that, thinking about how that played out in the big companies, um I actually never did, like, I never was able to build teams in the big companies.
Mm-hmm.
What I had to do was figure out how to solve a problem, get consensus, get everybody to say yes, get everybody to do their individual piece, even when they were on completely different teams,
Mm-hmm.
and then uh, launch it. But I was, I had to sell to to their team leads, their management structures, the ROI of why I needed them for, a
I
day, a
see.
week, some little thing, right? Like I had to get really good at persuasion, um, which meant I had to get good at research first to figure out how to explain to the boss of whoever it was that I needed
Hmm.
why it was valuable for them.
I see.
Like it was, whatever work we were doing, I tied into their success metrics
Hmm.
so that they're like, oh, well, of course I want to give them to you because there's a huge upside for them. And which meant I'd had to do the research up front to figure out what that looked like.
I see.
Way easier in smaller companies.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are two things that I can share that kind of worked in a mid-sized company. So, for example, LoadSmart, at one point, I had 5 squads. So I created, and 2 of them were stream-oriented squads, like bound to a product. So the traditional front end, back end, PM, engineering manager squad. And then I had enabling squads and complex subsystem squads, to use the verbiage from the team topology framework, where you have these different types of squads. So I had data enablement and I had data engineering as well. And I created an exchange program. So because at the time I was a director and all of those squads reported to my division and to me, I created this exchange program so nobody else had a say on that, just the engineering managers. So I could negotiate with the engineering managers saying, hey, let's do this exchange program. So we borrow somebody from your team, but then you get to borrow somebody from the other team. And they
Right.
get to, like, instead of doing mugs, they do pens
Yeah.
for a while, right? And it can help churn. They can think as a working vacation, because different set of problems, different set of people, it can do some refresh. I can get some external feedback from that person, because when the person's in the same team, there is some protection that
Right.
naturally is created at review time, because it's one of us, it's my tribe, right?
Yeah.
But when we move people around, we can get more fresh feedback, more honest
Yep.
feedback, more unbiased, not honest, unbiased feedback. So that helped. So within the division space, I had more maneuver to do these kind of things. So that worked. But I couldn't do the same across divisions. So if it was another director, it was much harder. Then
Yeah.
it's said,
Yeah.
oh, I love the idea, but my roadmap and this and that never happened. Another thing that how actually I could pull it off was the computer science club. So computer science club was when I was working for Working Cool, a company from New York. Now they became Accenture Song, and they design boutique for digital products. They build mobile apps and web apps, and they have like a vertical for designers, a vertical for project managers, and a vertical in tech for front end and back end. But the front end was very different from the people from back end. Usually, back end developers had some computer science background, and usually front end, they were self-taught. They started like building websites and got into programming and got good at it. So they didn't have the computer science background. So there was this divide, and one of the partners asked me, how can we kind of bridge these two groups, make them more um, embracing, cooperative, etc. So I created a computer science club. The computer science club was a meeting every Friday that we could do anything, but it was to put together these people with knowledge from computer science, more theoretical knowledge. How do you build a B tree? Or how do you do Donald Knuth's big O notation for algorithmic analysis? Or graph algorithms or whatever. And people wanting to learn that, because the front end people, or even a back end, but the people without the grounding, the foundational knowledge, they want to learn. And you
Right.
can go to material on the internet. There's lots of good material nowadays. But the human touch makes a difference. There are some psychologists that prove that for young kids, they cannot learn from a computer. Very young kids need the human element, so they feel the social connection and they can engage. If it's through a computer, they don't resonate.
Right.
And the same thing happens to any other age. We are social animals. Aristotle said that. And it's true. So the computer science club kind of broke those squad division barriers. And anybody, it's very freely. You can come, you cannot come. There's kind of no rules. Just be there, ask a question. If anybody knows, they'll try to answer. That was it. And it kind of worked for a while. When we got busier season, then people vanished. When we got like low season, people joined. But for me, it was a win.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really like that because you're cross pollinating knowledge, one, and part of the challenge of working on the front end is if you don't know what's possible on the back end, it limits your imagination.
Exactly.
And that's a real from a product development perspective, the more you can understand of how all this stuff works and the freer your imagination can be, the better it is, because you can be like, oh, wait a minute, like I know that the guys can get me this out of the back end somehow. Now the question is, how do I want to display it in a way that's compelling for an end user?
Absolutely.
So that's I really like that idea.
We did dojos, we did other stuff. So it was a good get together. Some companies do hackathons, which are great, but sometimes the hackathon has a different dynamics. It's not that freely and relaxed. Sometimes more competitive, and it's more like we have a goal and we need to deliver, and time bound. The computer science club is more free, so people really got relaxed and could explore and really get close to each other.
Yeah. I like that idea because you're feeding your curiosity rather than trying to compete.
Yes.
By definition, hackathons competitive.
And honestly, I think this is one of the biggest problems with the world today, because we created a society that is very competitive. And maybe it was not something that we did by design. Maybe it was just us following Darwin's evolutionary law of survival of the fittest, struggle for life, etc. And we're just mimicking that. But there are some philosophical currents that say, oh, mankind is detached from the animal world. We have consciousness, we have poetry, we have sophisticated language, we have history, we have all of that. So maybe we can transcend the limitations of Darwinistic rules of engagement. And if we do, what we need to focus on, it's less competition and more collaboration.
Right.
If we change that mentality, it's funny. I started thinking on this when once I talked to one of my managers and we were negotiating compensation. And then I said, I want to raise. And then he said, how much do you want to make? What is your goal in terms of money? Because you can always ask for more money, but that's shallow. I mean, have you thought about how much money do you need in your life? Because a lot of, I don't know, Jeff Bezos very likely has more money than he needs or can spend, right? So there is too much money. So how much money do you... And I think as a society, we're a little bit like that. I want more.
Right.
But how much more do we need? For example, we could work 4 times a week. I don't think we could have better lives if we extended the weekend to be 3 days. And some companies do that. Some companies don't work on Fridays, for example. And maybe it improves productivity. So that kind of thinking out of the box, it's something that excites me.
Yeah. So I actually worked at my first job out of college, I was an auto mechanic.
Okay.
Spent 7 years wrenching on cars.
It's so cool.
Yeah, totally. My head goes different directions, right?
That's good.
We were only open Tuesday through Friday.
Right.
We weren't open on Mondays because the guy that owned the shop was a car racer.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Okay.
he said, because when I started, I'm like, how come you guys aren't open on Mondays, right? And he said, well, because when I get back from the track on Sunday night
He needs
and
to
it's 1
relax.
o'clock in the morning,
Yes.
I do not want to go to work the next day,
Of course.
and I might actually have to spend Monday figuring out how to fix something I broke over the weekend.
Yes.
And so, this is how we run. And I was like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Great, and so it helped me because on Mondays I work on my project car, like,
Right. Right.
and nobody was around, and it was, yeah, it was good. And the whole how much is enough is such an interesting, um like, I've thought about that a lot for a lot of years, that
Hmm.
same kind of thing. And I think, and we're totally getting philosophical here, but it's the question is, how much is enough, and then how much is gluttony,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Yes.
And when you go into gluttony, not just food wise, but it actually has a cost to you.
Yeah.
And so, if nothing else, it's opportunity cost, and you're not doing something else you could be doing. And so, one of my observations has been that in a lot of contexts, when people are gluttonous, it's because they believe there's a scarcity in that area. Like Jeff Bezos having all that money is kind of an accident, right? Like,
Yeah.
he didn't know that Amazon was going to go quite as big as it did on
Agree.
day one. You
Agree.
know,
Agree.
nobody could have imagined that up front, right? Like, that's just pure fairy tale.
Yeah. It took more than
Um,
10 years.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you know, I won't accuse him of gluttony, but I think when people get stuck and they've got this scarcity model in their head, and they never step back to go, oh, wait a minute, I've got enough. That's one of the pieces. It's like, when the VP of Eng says we need to produce more code, and you're like, well, okay, great, okay, how much more? What is the point where us producing more code just because you want to be able to have a number doesn't make sense anymore because of the human cost, uh, and and will the customers even care?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like, we can push features out the door that no one's going to want. It makes the code base more complex
Exactly.
and fragile.
It's deteriorating the product.
Right, exactly. When I was at Google, one of the product managers, I was in the, at that time it was called G Suite, the
Cool.
thing. Um, one of the internal conversations that we were having was features that were being pushed out and didn't get any adoption.
Okay.
And this is, product manager does all this work, decides this is a great idea, engineering builds it, we dog food it, and then it goes out to all the admiring masses who are going
Right.
to love this.
Right.
And the adoption rate was just horrible. And
Huh.
and I kept thinking, clearly in
Wow.
the process, there is something broken very
Right.
badly there,
Right.
right?
Right.
It was not the problem I had to go solve, so I never, like.
Right.
But one of the things that was interesting was, like, this was a known thing. Like, people are like, "Oh, we just released this thing," and the product manager would be so excited and proud of this functionality, and then crickets, when it went out. And
Totally.
it
Totally.
was just such a, like, maybe, there's some products that don't need to be any better. Like this fountain pen, the kit's awesome, right? I've had this pen for 15 years.
Right.
I don't need a fancier pen.
Right. Right.
I like the weight, I like the balance, it writes all the time, the ink flow, like, don't, like, if I ever need another pen, I want another one of these,
Right. Right.
right? Like, seriously, you'd have to, like, I don't know what you'd have to do to get. And so, don't, it's like figuring out what the enough point is, I think, is, and not just assuming, oh, the buying audience wants more bells and whistles. It just
Absolutely.
seems like it's such a it kind of goes back to that whole Darwinian thing, right?
Totally.
Like people aren't stopping to go, wait a minute, what's the thing where that's plenty, you know?
Yeah.
And
The image that comes to my mind is Mickey Mouse in Fantasia from Disney, where he
yeah,
is the magician and he automates a broomstick to kind of carry water and fill a well. And then he duplicates the broomsticks. And then he has thousands of broomsticks carrying water to the well. And then there's a flood. But the goal is,
right,
well, we have to put water in the well, put water in the well. And we are kind of like that nowadays. We have to push products to the market. You
right,
know, after one successful product, let's do another. The goal is not to make the world a better place.
right, right.
It's not about that. So that nuance makes the whole difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I don't know how to solve that problem.
Me neither.
Yeah. Well, at least we recognize it, right?
But that's the first step, right?
Yeah, it's the first step. Exactly.
Start acknowledging the problem.
Yeah. 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 This has been super cool. This has been a great conversation. Thank you.
It feels like I'm talking to an old friend.
Well, I am old, and I'm your friend, so we got it, right? We're making it work.
Click.
Yeah, it's perfect. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it. I think I might have to have you on again sometime.
I'm at your disposal. It's a great pleasure.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording, folks. Thank you so much for listening.